So here we are, it's a bit windy again today. Bottom of the third of a mile, 122 feet rise. So I'm going to run it through that. I'm not going to torture it by putting the trailer on the back because it's only 48 volts, 52 volts. Struggles with this a bit. But let's just get up this hill to make sure it can do it. So I've cracked it open. Let's have a look what we got. We've got a 23 amp controller, KDS. It's obviously a battery blender in here, which you'll need. And obviously there's all this space on the inside of there to get all this in. It's nice to see that they've updated the connectors to XT90s. That's a welcome change, especially if you're a modder, but yeah, cracking start. So we got a bit of sport for a minute. I'll explain that as we go up the hill. You've probably read about this or watched it on another review of these X bikes. And I'll explain what I think the reason is, or the reasoning behind it is, later on in this video. So let's get up this hill. Yeah, it's having no problems getting up here. A bit of pedalling. This is classed as 1 in 15, so steep enough. But yeah, made it. Absolutely no problem. Again, I won't be breaking any land speed records as we hit the 40 mile an hour song, but I've done it. So I kind of wonder if Engwe is trying to reward people for putting a little bit more effort into the bike. The shut down the sport mode after about a minute or whatever it is, it isn't a bad idea. It's twofold. One, it helps save your battery because, to be honest, you can get a reasonable speed at normal mode. And two, stops the controller from overheating. And three, it makes you put a little bit more effort in, which isn't a bad thing. You know, my thing is I want to see more people on e-bike seats, and I think Engwe is starting to see the way forward with this. As you can hear right now, it's genuinely a quiet bike. You know, the tyres are reasonably quiet. The motor's quiet even when it kicks in. And as you can see, when you're in normal mode, it still draws power quite at a heavy rate. Can go into the settings and reduce the power ratios on different pass settings. You know, you can have it as high as you want, really. But again, that feels range. And that's not the exercise we're trying to get across. It's that these things have improved to a point now where you can get decent range without having to put much more than a bit of effort in. Oh my god, the sun's come out. So ultimately, what's it like for town traffic? Well, it's nimble. You know, which is what you need. You need something nimble. I take it you're pulling over, are you? Don't indicate. Yeah, it's nimble. You know, it does what you want it to do. And ultimately, that is to get you from A to B as easy as possible. And that's what e-bikes are all about. So traffic lights is where you want the sport mode, so you can kick off quite quickly. Want to race? You gonna race me? yeah, you don't want to be getting stuck in traffic or up in traffic because you've got no initial torque to get you off from A to B. And this gives me a minute of sport mode to get out of the traffic. So what do you think of it?
Well, I was intrigued enough to stop to ask. It looks really interesting. So we have e-bikes. We cycle on e-bikes a lot in New Zealand, where we come from. You noticed that it was fold up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was intrigued about this and whether that worked. So I don't know. What would you say about that?
Not a lot from me at the moment because I don't really understand the point of it.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, one of the ideas I had was when I'm not riding it, is sitting on it. You know, with you facing the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And probably even on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's strong enough. It's, you know, it's a very strong bike. They make very strong bikes.
Yeah.
So
what about the tyres? Are they
puncture proof, apparently? Well, they're not puncture proof, but they're as near as I put something called Tannis armour in mine.
Yeah.
And it stops getting punctures. But, you can get a liner for it. You can get something called flat out. Don't get slime, it's rubbish.
Okay.
But you can get something called flat out that stops you from getting, it's Kevlar, liquid Kevlar basically. So as soon as you get a puncture, it seals it straight away.
Isn't that the bulletproof vest stuff?
Yeah. It's exactly that.
So the other thing I really like the look of is these mirrors.
They're mine, I paid for them. They're very good, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're like, I always say it's like, remember the old, cathode ray TV tubes.
Yeah.
It's like going from that to 4K.
Ah.
So.
Yeah, no, I like those. I had some on mine and my bike fell over and it broke, but it was not good. It rattled. Do they rattle?
No, not at all.
Because that's the thing that bothered me, is everything was moving so much, there was no point having it. Yeah, no, it looks interesting. What was the ride like? Comfortable? That seemed pretty comfy?
That rear suspension is like the Rolls Royce of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the Rolls Royce of rear suspension.
Yeah, looks good.
It's absolutely one of the most comfortable bikes I've ridden. So it's, yeah, I'm really pleased with it.
Very good.
Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure. Have a good day.
Right, let's get down onto the bypass. One of the great things about these bikes is they're highly visible, although currently I'm dressed like a ninja. But that means you can get onto bypasses and stuff. That means you don't have to go around about the houses to get from A to B. So as long as you've got mirrors and you can see what's going on around you, you're pretty safe. I always say to people, why aren't you using mirrors? And then the next time I see them, they got mirrors. Like, I didn't know. It changed the bike riding experience. Just going across the M1 in Yorkshire. So they go downhill as well. There's no speed limit for e-bikes going downhill that I'm aware of. Because it's downhill, that's inertia for you. Feels very stable, this bike, going downhill. And I know I say the word stable a lot in my reviews because I've ridden some horrible bikes in the past that just didn't feel stable. This one feels stable. I like the stability of this. It's more stable than the new Pro 2.0. And that's basically down to the weight. More weight, more stable. So we're coming out to another weird and wonderful hill. This one bends and turns as it goes round, so it's bloody horrible. In fact, it's an horrible hill. I'm going to pull it into sport mode. There we go, into sport. Let's get up this one. So normally 48 volt e-bikes struggle up this hill. This one's actually steeper but shorter than the one you see me at the beginning of the videos. But again, it's a different kind of hill. But bit of effort, it's coming up here. Let's get back into power mode. There we go. As you can see, it's drawing over 1,000 watts of power to get up that hill. But it did it. Fine style. So we're coming back down into Wakefield again. I think at this point I'm doing more for Wakefield tourism than Jane McDonald. Wherever she goes, she mentions Wakefield. This is another nasty hill. Just coming out the centre of Wakefield. I'm going to start singing in a minute. Do a Jane McDonald. Yeah, this is another nasty hill, but The problem with these cameras is the depth of field doesn't show you exactly how steep they are. And oddly, the GPS that I've got in this doesn't accurately do slope. So, yeah, it's just to give you an idea really of how well this thing gets up hills. I'm putting a bit of effort in, which I like to do. But ultimately, you don't get much effort that you can pull into it unless you find in hills. So Big Daddy's turned up. If you were wondering what the difference between the two is, oddly, quite a bit. But the form and function's still the same. They both fold. This one has 26-inch wheels. Obviously this one has 20-inch wheels. But obviously it's got an adjustable gooseneck. There's less of you having to fit yourself to the bike in the X20 than there is on the X26, because obviously you've got a fixed dual crown. But I have to say, it's a lovely looking thing. Really is. So you can see some of the geometry differences, but they're not much. And it turns out the owner of this bike's a bit heavier than me. Mine seems quicker. He'll probably argue the toss for that. But there is a weight difference. So the weight difference between these two bikes is around about 6 to 7 kilos. So it makes a difference, especially on rolling road. And resistance. Same tyres. Which just bigger. And I'm just about to go up a big hill, but it needs me using my gears, and so far so good. But here we go, let's get this thing up some hills again. So I'm going to wander around in eco mode for a bit and see what that gives me. But it's giving me plenty of power, even in eco mode. So where it's saving power, I don't know. But I'm going to try and not use the throttle. Like I say, I think the Chinese e-bike manufacturers decided to go to 1134/56 on these bikes. You could do away with the throttle. Just use the gears, that's what they're there for. So you've probably seen photographs of my other bikes up on this hill. I thought I'd come up here to give some of my final thoughts on this bike. I love it. It's flawed. You know, it's massively overcomplicated for what it is, but if you put the effort in, this bike rewards you. As you can see, I've just been riding round with no throttle. Bigger hills with a push shove, you can get going. There's a bit of a delay between the sensor cutting in and giving you power, but you know, I think if you're £200, you can get away with no throttle easily. I gotta lose some more weight. You all know my background with Engwe and how I feel about Engwe bikes. Well, they've come a long way. And I'll tell you something else, the delivery was a delight. 2 guys turned up from a company called BTS, lifted the bike into my kitchen and left. No marks on the box. Total way away from what Engwe's delivery used to be. And it was fabulous. 2 guys turned up and dropped it in the house. I actually left them a 5-star review on Google. They were that good. And it's the second bike that they've delivered to me. 22 odd amp hour against the 16 in the Pro. We can knock off on them amp hour for the 6 kilos extra weight that this bike is. Let's talk about that rear seat. I personally don't see much of a point in it until I sat down on it, facing the other way. And you can just sit on it that way. But there are foot peg holes for it. And you know, you could actually carry somebody on the back of this. It's rated weight-wise for it. The batteries are overcomplicated. But you can have them both on at the same time, get a decent range out of it. I believe you get more range out of this bike if you have both batteries on at the same time. Plus you're in less risk of dripping one out till it's completely dead. You don't really want to be doing that. So I'd leave both batteries on at the same time. The gooseneck is the same as the one on the new Pro 2. The brakes are good. They're not marked up as Logan, the same as the ones on the new Engwe Engine Pro 2.0. But they look and feel just like Logan brakes, so they're fab. Still using that mid-shock. I haven't worked out what it does. I've bounced up and down on it a few times and gone off a few curbs, and I think it's the rear of the bike that's taken a lot of the bumps. You know, those shocks at the back, they're the Rolls Royce of e-bike shocks. Air shocks, you can adjust them to you. What's not to like? So let's get back down to the elephant in the room. How it looks. It's a bit Marmite. So not everybody's going to like it, but I'll give it this. It's really sturdy. Really sturdy. A solid bike. And the suspension, what can I say? It's brilliant. The front forks are the same as what you'll get on most of Engwe's 20-inch bikes. They do the job. I'd probably swap them out for air forks that fit me a bit better. I'll probably swap the pedals because I've got big wide feet. So I'll probably swap the pedals out. I love the way you can lock that battery in place so the clasp don't open so you can't steal the battery. You can also lock and turn off the one on the mid, so there's no power left going to this bike. But there's a lot of bikes out there now have absolutely no locks, keys or anything, no security whatsoever. This still has security within it. So you can get into the P settings by the function settings by pressing them two at once. All the instructions are online for you, so you don't need me to start posting about that. I do like these, I've always liked them. They're really comfortable. They were the original ones on my Engine Pro, and they're very, very comfortable. The horn, well, somebody moved that away from me earlier, so that obviously works. The clasp, well, that one locks, like I said, to keep the battery in place so nobody can steal it. It's got a good, the folding mechanism's changed. That locking handle's brilliant now. It does lock everything together. So let's talk about a couple of things I don't like. Guess what? That saddle. You can swap the saddle out for some of your liking. Like I said, a Cloud 9 will cost you about 30 quid. but I just don't get on with that saddle. And while I'm at it, that thing, it looks a little bit, I've just been down to Alphas, or I've just been down to B&Q to buy a screw to screw that on, is a pretty much an afterthought. The folding pedals are nice, they do the job quite well, they're metal, they're not plastic. And well, the only reason I'd swap these out is because I've got wide feet. It's a world apart from what they were selling before. The service is a world apart. I don't know what the customer service is like, but I see less complaints about it online, so they're obviously doing something. There's a new Engwe app out, which I'm going to download later, and I'll put a link to in this, and I'll be reviewing that app next week. You know, that chain stays in place with two-sided mount, so that ain't going anywhere. Gooseneck, it's strong, really strong, and that clasp is very well made, very well made. Nice little warning about brakes there. Unless you know about hydraulic brakes, I'd leave it all alone anyway. Good brakes though, really good brakes. Like I said, they're not marked up as Logan, but they feel like Logan and they look like Logan. Good enough for me. As for taking this over different terrains, this is fine. You know, gravel paths, bike paths, you know, the rough stuff. You know, this is fine. This is absolutely fine. I mean, you can take this, I wouldn't take it off some EMTB off-road stuff, but the majority of stuff that you come across, some of the stuff in their videos that I see for off-road riding, I'd probably say, yeah, get away with that. I'd put some anti-puncture in it, you know, I'd look at some Tannis armour, I'd look at getting some flat out, because the last thing you want when you're in the middle of nowhere doing a rough ride on an e-bike is basically having to deal with a puncture. You know, I've said it before and I'll say it again, Engwe has the opportunity to be the biggest in the game at this. They really do. And they're pretty much let down by things like customer service, which they need to get the hang of, because people won't buy if they're getting no support. It's as simple as that. So Engwe, if you're listening, you know, you've sort of won me over again, but like I said, you know, what I dealt with 2 years ago and what I'm dealing with now are two different things. Yeah, I like this bike. I do, I really like this bike. It's a fun ride. Because that's the other thing you need to be having when you're out riding around on one of these e-bikes. You need to be having fun. And this is fun all day long. It's good fun. One of the things you have to remember when you're looking at this bike, you have to remember it folds in half and it goes in the back of your car or your van or your camper van or whatever. But it feels so sturdy. It's not what you expect. You expect something a little more fragile, but this feels solid. You know, one of the things that used to annoy me about my Engwe Engine Pro, the first one, was that battery class, the centre class. It never felt solid to me. And it used to really annoy me. And as much as I adjusted it, it didn't seem to work how it should. But ultimately, they've resolved that issue. They resolved that issue. And the bikes are better for it. Those clasps, like on the gooseneck and on the battery access clasp and the one for the seat battery, they're solid. They're not going anywhere. I read somewhere the other day about somebody that owns one of these saying that, oh, my battery keeps sliding down, my seat battery, and it's just like, you need to tighten it up. You need to get it really tight, and once it's really tight and there's no space between that rubber and your battery, it ain't going anywhere. My battery hasn't set down, and I weigh, I repeat it all the time, 230 plus pounds plus my bag. So I believe Engwe have delivered. They've delivered brilliantly. I wish they'd ditch out of these seats. And what's the other thing? Oh, that battery port. It's just cheap looking. And on a bike that costs what this costs, you want something a little bit more substantial. At least on the new Engine Pro 2, they've used a hex head instead of just a posi screw. And that makes it look a bit tidier. For a 48 volt bike, it absolutely has no problems getting uphill. Even though it's heavier than the new Pro 2.0, one of the differences is when the cadence sensor cuts in. Once it's in, you don't have to do a lot of paddling, you've got cruise control, and you get used to having that around. But you have to make more effort. And I've done a video about the difference between torque sensors and mid-drives and, well, basically explaining what a mid-drive does and what, you know, a torque sensor does. And I'll put a link into the bottom of this, and a cadence sensor, hub drives and mid-drives. I explained before, these are more like the automatic, e-bikes. They're easily sort of accessible. Whereas with the torque sensor, you've got to put a bit more effort in. If you don't want to put any effort in, I'd buy this. I'd buy this all day long. Or the old Engine Pro. I think it's been updated. I'm going to ask. But if you want to get a bit of exercise, if you want to put a little bit of effort in, I highly recommend that you buy the Engine Pro 2. It's just such a spectacular bike. It really is a good bike. There's nothing wrong with this. If you're lazy, you just want to put around, go shopping with it, this is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It all depends on what you want. But you've got so much choice now. Yeah, I think the only way I can describe this bike, if I was to describe it at all, it's complicated, but it's worth putting the effort in to get what you get out of it. And what you get out of it is a really, really good bike. Yeah, you can take it off onto roads and stuff. You know, a bit of gravel, never hurt anyone. It seems fine on this. It's gravel and mud and twigs and all the slippery stuff. Gotta say again, the brakes are brilliant. The brakes are really good. The brakes are my favourite brakes if they're sort of a subsidiary Logan of what I've got on my other bikes. And yeah, they're very good. If you want to splash out, people want to ask what advice about brakes. The Dura NT5Es. It's like being hit with a wall. Genuinely is. Early birds.
So the breakdown, where are we at? Let's have a look. What's good about it? That rear suspension is a Rolls Royce of e-bike suspension. It's brilliant. Especially for an old dude like me. It's just brilliant. And within that, it goes a little bit up in my estimation of what rear suspension should be. I've had Fox and all sorts on mine, and this is brilliant. I like the 22 amp hour range. You can't knock that. I've got 32% battery left, and I've done pretty much 32 miles. So that'll take me up to 40 miles. Messed around in different configurations of pass, but pretty much a lot of that was on normal mode pass 5. Bit of eking about, you can easily get 50 miles out of this bike, and I weigh, and I know I always say it, I weigh how much? 230 pound plus my pack, which is another 15, so that's nearly 250 pound on the back of that bike. Like that gooseneck, it's very well engineered, really well engineered. It's nothing like the ones that we used to have. It just feels stronger, it looks stronger, it looks better made, and obviously they've taken on board what happened to the old goosenecks, and they've done a really good job of it. Love the display, I'm used to it. Had it on my old Engine Pro, and it shows wattage. So you can see what you're drawing from that battery. This makes you more efficient. You'll tend to, when you start seeing you're pulling out 1100 watts out of that battery, you'll tend to start looking at it a different way. I love those 8-speed Shimano trigger gears. I really do like them. They're far better than that Tombstone thing, which I really do dislike, and I think it spoils e-bikes, but it's everywhere. There's a dual guard on the chainring. That's going to stop that chain coming out. I really like that. I've had a chain come out on me a couple of times and it's just really annoying. More so on my own e-bike. So they look like Logan brakes. They feel like Logan brakes, but they're not marked up as Logan brakes. But they're very stoppy and they act just like Logan brakes, and I love the brakes. 23 amp controller, it's enough. I mean, I'm not using this as a, you know, like it's a Sauron or anything else. For me, it's all about range, but I do like a little bit of power in there, especially when it comes to torque. And that controller does the job really well. So some people have moaned about this, but I actually like the idea that the sport mode cuts out after a minute or two. And the reason for that is, one, it's saving the controller from getting overheated, which is partially the reason I think they did it. Two, once you're in normal mode, you're using less battery. So you're not sucking that battery to death. And then thirdly, I like the fact that you have to put a bit of effort in, as I said in the video. I think it's rewarding you and encouraging you to actually put a bit of effort in. There's nothing wrong with that. I like a bit of exercise out of my e-biking. And it's easy to fold. If you like that sort of thing, if you fold, I can't remember the last time I folded any of my bikes up, but yeah, it's handy. I own a sports car which doesn't have a lot of space in the back, but I used to be able to get my Engwe Engine Pro in there. Lastly, on the positives, it's sturdy. It's such a sturdy bike. It's strong. I love that. I love that. It's part of the reason that I like my own e-bike, that it's solid, it's sturdy, and you feel safe on it. You feel confident on it. And I really like that. Well done, Engwe. So middle of the road stuff, that mid suspension and front suspension, it's good enough. It does a good enough job. I was fine on it. I was really surprised at my weight. I wasn't bottoming out the front suspension, but it's fine. Something simple like that bend in the crossbar makes it easier to get on and off, and I like that. It's partly why I like step-throughs. That's why I own the step-through. Yeah, can't really knock that. It's quite handy. I'd probably remove that back seat if I didn't have any kids and put a third battery on there, 20 amp hour, giving you then 42 amp hours of range. That's a lot of amp hours. And for me, I find that to be the sweet spot, which is my own bike. I mean, obviously I built that 50 amp hour one, the 50 amp hour Engwe Engine X, but I thought it was a bit of overkill. Who's going to do 100 miles in a day? For the life of me, I can't work out what that mid-shock does. I've bounced up and down on it and don't seem to really do much. It's a bit of give within the frame, I suppose, but I really don't find it a necessity. But it's obviously there for the geometry of the bike. Folding pedals, I got wide feet, so they never really work out very well for me, but set pedals, really good ones, 20 quid. But they're good enough. I mean, I've been riding around on it for 2 days, well, a day and a half, and they've been fine. So, like I said in the video, the elephant in the room, it's a bit Marmite. You know, you're either going to like the look of this bike or you're not. And initially, I asked them for the X20 because, one, I'm a 20x4 fan, and I didn't think it got enough love. You know, everybody's buying the 24 or the X26, and I actually really like the look of it. It looks strong. And having seen it up against the X26, you know, you're not forced into any silly positions to try and make the bike fit you. It's a really good design. So down to the dislikes. That saddle. I can't stand that saddle. It's an easy swap out. Cloud9, 30 quid. The charging port looks so... Oh, look, we're going to throw a little screw in it and put a rubber bung in it and that's all you're going to get. The one on the rear battery is fine, but that one on the side looks awful. It's just a normal posi screw. And whereas on the Engwe Engine Pro 2.0, they've used an X-head screw, which makes it look a little bit tidier. What I'd like them to do is use an X-head screw, but have it blacked. Have it anodized black, and then it all blends in. But it's that screw for me, attention to detail, that's just, it lets it down, really does let it down. The 2 amp charger, which is fine for the front battery, but then you've got the rear battery, which is 14 whatever amp hours. It's a bit mean. What it could have done with is 2 chargers, and I'd have paid extra for a charger, or buy an extra charger off of Engwe if I needed one, but a 3 amp for the rear, because when you work it out, and you've also got to change the charging over in between this, it's 11 hours to charge. 2 amp charger. That's really mean. Well, I wouldn't say mean, but it's a real time waster. And if you need your bike the next day for work, you don't want to be getting up in the middle of the night to change your charger over. You can argue you can buy a second charger, but it would have been nice to have a 3 amp charger for that rear battery in the box. So, what do I give it out of 10? I was thinking 8.5, but I found that a bit mean because I actually really like the bike. So, 8.75 out of 10. Because there's nothing you can compare it with, apart from it's a 20 before. But yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant little bike. If Engwe are going this way in the future, and they're going to continue to design good bikes with good quality build, I'm in. And I've been the hardest person to turn around. And trust me, people say to me, you know, you're getting free e-bikes. Listen. If I worked it out how much I was earning an hour, even with the free e-bikes, out of all the effort I put in, I'd probably be on 30p an hour. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the review. Don't know what they're going to send me next, if they're going to send me anything at all. But they got me back on board, and yeah, it's a really good bike, and they have moved on. Oh, one more thing. Delivery guys, as I said in the video, they are brilliant. They turn up, 2 men get out, they put the bike wherever you want it, and they bugger off. Fabulous. No dents in the boxes. Nothing. I love it. And that's why I gave them a 5-star review on Google. And I rarely give 5-star reviews on Google. But they were really good. Well done, Engwe, for sorting that out. Have a nice weekend, everyone.